Now going to let us look at what actionable genes in the human body are working, which ones are partially broken, and which ones are completely broken. And remember, these genes supply some of the most important raw materials in the human body. When these genes are broken, we need to supplement for their function so that we can take over the deficits in your body for raw material. So when you get your genetic test, you're going to get a screen that looks something like this. The first thing I want you to notice is that all of the colored rectangles in your screen, they should be green. If they're yellow, it means that one parent gave you a gene mutation at that location. If they're red, it means both of your parents gave you a gene mutation at that location. So when they're green like this, which is a perfect genetic result, all of these genes are working, which means there's no deficit in raw material. If you have a yellow at any of these locations, it means that one parent gave you the gene mutation and that gene is only supplying 40 to 60% of the raw material it's supposed to. If you have reds at any of these locations, it means that none of the raw material are being supplied by that gene, meaning it has completely broken and it is not supplying the raw material that it is supposed to supply for whatever function it's responsible for. So let's walk our way through each of these gene mutations and let's talk about what they mean in the human body. First of all, what I want you to know about the sequence of genes is that it is exactly that. It is a sequence. It kind of goes like this, and it works its way all the way up and out. So in other words, we start here, and we actually work our way through the first gene, to the second, to the third, to the fourth, and all the way out the top. So you can see that if I'm broken closer to the bottom, it affects the entire chain. MTHFR is one of the worst gene mutations to have, but one of the easiest gene mutations to fix. So let's talk about what happens if you're broken down here to the rest of this chain. Remember, the lower you're broken, the more it affects the rest of this chain. Very quickly, MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, is primarily responsible for converting folic acid into the usable form called 5-methylfolate. So you are usually deficient in something called 5-methylfolate, one of the most important raw materials in the human body. What can happen when you're deficient in that raw material? Well, it leads to poor gut health. It leads to anxiety, depression, anxiousness, ADD, ADHD, OCD, manic depression, bipolar, and all kinds of other disorders that are related to a deficit in that raw material. If you've suffered from gut health, poor sleep, anxiety, depression, ADD, ADHD, OCD, or things like cramping, gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, it can all come from the deficit in this genetic location. If you're yellow, you have a 40% deficit. If you're red, you have a complete deficit. When we get to the second set of genes, let me erase this, it's getting a little messy. When we get to the second gene location, these are largely responsible for your gut. So your lower GI is here and your upper GI is here. If you have gas, bloating, diarrhea, constipation, irritability that you thought was related to food allergies, think again. Remember, if you are allergic to something, it's consistent. You're not allergic to milk on Monday, not allergic to it Wednesday afternoon, and then re-allergic to it on Saturday morning. Every single time you drink milk, you will have an allergic reaction. What drives people crazy that have genetic mutations in these two locations is that they have not been able to pinpoint what is causing the irritation in their gut. And it drives them crazy because they go, is it wheat? Is it gluten? Is it dairy? Is it soy? Is it corn? And you start eliminating all these things from your diet and it kind of works, but it doesn't fully work. Or it works for a couple of days or weeks and then it stops working. Remember, that is indicative that it's your genes and not actually indicative that it's an allergy. So these genes are largely responsible for your gut motility. They also play an important role in reducing one of the most inflammatory compounds in the human diet, in the human body, homocysteine. Reducing homocysteine by passing it through the area here that these two genes code for into something called L-methionine is one of the most important processes in the human body. Why? Because homocysteine is inflammatory. It acts like glass shards on the inside of your arteries, causing your arteries to clamp down and increase the pressure. It's very likely that if you have a genetic mutation in these two locations, that hypertension runs in your family. You see, it's not truly the disease hypertension, it's something called hyperhomocystinemia, which leads to hypertension. It's the absence of raw material. The exciting thing about this whole chart is that all we're doing is looking for the absence of raw material. MTHFR, absence of raw material in 5-methylfolate. MTR, absence of raw material in B vitamins, pyridoxine, riboflavin, thiamine, niacin. MTRR, absence of raw material in methylated B vitamins. So by the end of this talk, I'm just explaining to you your symptoms that you can expect to see from this chart. You're going to get a link with the specific supplements that are recommended for you. It's always advisable to run this by your primary care physician before you start any supplement program. These are suggested guidelines based on your genetic mutations. So when homocysteine rises in the blood, what kind of things happen? Anxiousness, anxiety, irritability. You ever find that it's hard to control your temper? Or you find you go to 0 to 100 real quick, or people in your life go 0 to 100 really quick on some seemingly innocuous subjects? The punishment doesn't fit the crime. That's because this is largely responsible for homocysteine and also intimately involved in the production of neurotransmitters. Neurotransmitters form the basis of all mood. Imagine if you had a reduction in the amount of serotonin your body was able to produce. Remember, the definition of depression is an inadequate supply of serotonin. So if these genes are broken and we lack adequate levels of serotonin, then we may manifest that as depression. And none of the medications that are on the market today really seek to raise serotonin. In fact, they do the opposite. We ration what little serotonin you have with something called an SSRI, a serotonin reuptake inhibitor. And all that does is take what little serotonin you have and ration it. It doesn't raise serotonin. Remember, that valuable neurotransmitter is made right here in your gut, coded for by these genes, and when these genes are broken, we can be deficient in that raw material. So I'm excited for those of you that have that genetic mutation because we may be able to replenish the amount of serotonin. So these are the center breaks. As you get to this break, if you have a yellow location or a red location here, you're very likely to have more of the psychiatric symptoms. Depression, anxiety, significant issues, challenges like drug and alcohol addiction or addictive behavior of all kinds. Because remember, the absence of dopamine is also the presence of addiction. The absence of dopamine can be the presence of addiction. And so when this gene is broken, we lack adequate supplies of dopamine, so we develop an addictive-like behavior. I'm not saying you have to have that, but I'm saying it's likely and it can run in your family. And the way that we fix this is we fix this with glutathiones, B vitamins, and methylated nutrients and amino acids specific to that genetic break. And then finally, we get up here to the top. If you are red or yellow in this location, I will bet you that you have one of two types of sleep patterns. Either you go to bed tired and you have a hard time falling asleep because your mind keeps you awake, or you fall asleep easily, but your mind wakes you up multiple times throughout the night. And what you're thinking about throughout the night are not demonstrative, life-changing thoughts. It's little nagging, irritating thoughts like, does my belt match my shoes? Did I return that email today? Did I get everything on my grocery list? And this can drive you crazy because you're going, why am I awake at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning thinking about this stuff? I shouldn't be laying awake thinking about this. This is because COMT, catechol-O-methyltransferase, is responsible for quieting the mind. If we cannot quiet the mind wakes up as our environment quiets down. So people that have difficulty sleeping very often have a yellow or red genetic break right here. Now, this was just meant to serve as an overview. You're going to see a series of links below this video. You can click on the specific break that you have. Yellow MTHFR, red MTHFR. Yellow MTR, red MTR, and I will give you more detail on your specific break. It's just science.